Welcome, everyone. We're just gonna let Zoom slowly let people in. I know it takes a moment sometimes, so we'll just wait a minute as people start to join. Thank you all for joining us too. So as we do wait for people to join, I'll start off with the introduction. My name is Nicole Jamerzinski, and I'm the Manager of Development and Engagement at CanWatch. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the last session of the 2023 Academy. We're really fortunate to have the Art Hub joining us for this last session. It's going to be a really exciting one. So thank you all at the Art Hub for joining and presenting. The Academy has been designed to provide a convenient, accessible learning platform for our members, colleagues, and peers. The sessions we offer respond to the professional development and learning needs and interests that you have shared with us. We are pleased to provide this opportunity to support our members in this way and look forward to it. And look, we had a great week of other learning, and thank you all for joining us for those sessions. Today's final session is being delivered with the support of and partnership with Global Affairs Canada. So thank you, Global Affairs, as well, for allowing this to happen. And I'm joining you today from Kamoka, Ontario, which is on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, Haudenosaunee, Lenapehoik, and the Attawandarans peoples. While we meet today on a virtual platform, I would like to share my gratitude and respect to all Indigenous peoples from all nations across Turtle Island. They are the traditional guardians of the land upon which we live and work, and I acknowledge their long-standing relationship with this territory. Before we dive into the session, there are a few housekeeping notes I'd like to share. Simultaneous interpretation in French and English will be available, so please click on that globe on the bottom screen, the little icon, and you can select your preferred language through that channel. This session is also being recorded, and we will be sharing a recording of the session on canwatch.ca in the coming weeks. Now, if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A period, and we do encourage you to put your question in the chat so the Art Hub folks can read and answer any questions that come along. And if you are having any technical difficulties during the session, please write a message to Tina LaRochelle, who will be able to support with those needs. Now, I'd like to offer a warm and special thanks to the Art Hub for joining us to discuss thinking past anti-racism terminology, art as a personal journey. Layla, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Well, hello, everyone. After all of these years into the pandemic, still forgetting to unmute. So, hello, my name is Layla. I'm the racial justice expert and the co-lead at the Anti-Racist Cooperation Hub. I'll take a second to let my two amazing colleagues introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. My name is Warpen Zdi, and I am the other co-lead at the Anti-Racist in Cooperation Hub. We need to get our name more smooth. It's always hard. And we're really excited to be joining you today. Megan?
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Really happy to be here today. So my name is Megan, and I'm the ARC Program Assistant at the ARC Hub. Keep it simple, ARC Hub. So back to you, Layla.
Thank you. So, yes, welcome to Thinking Past the Terminology, Understanding Anti-Racism as a Personal Journey. The ARC Hub is a global affairs funded project, and it's housed at Cooperation Canada. So thank you both to Global Affairs Canada and Cooperation Canada for making this possible today, as well as, of course, our amazing partner, CanWatch and the CanWatch Academy. So a little bit about today, we're going to be, and before I go into our overview, I'll give a moment to say throughout the presentation, whether it's right now or throughout, we'd love to hear what you came into the session hoping for. Sessions often are built a certain way without that in mind, but in the way that we want to think about moving forward in building sessions and just evaluating this session, we'd love to hear a little bit of what you were thinking of, what you were needing, what you were wanting coming into this space. So feel free to put that in the chat. But for today's agenda, we'll be doing this moment of overview. We'll go a little bit into introducing the program, the ARC Hub, and then we'll do some ground setting. We'll be doing an exercise, reflection, and then we'll close out for the day. I always like to say, I never learned time. I'm terrible at it. It's been years of doing trainings, workshops, public speaking, and I've quite literally never been able to negotiate with time in a way where we meet each other halfway. So really hoping to make sure to cover everything in the time that we have. But at the end of it, you'll be receiving the slides and everything. So you'll be able to have everything. And yeah, this is the hope here is to be interactive and really engaging. And so we're really hoping that folks will engage through the chat and during our later exercise. So get ready now, because this will be a moment of conversation, a moment of engagement, a moment of reflecting together. So I'd like to start off by acknowledging the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe and Algonquin Nation. I would like to acknowledge this nation as the traditional and continued caretakers of this land we live and work on in what is colonially known as Ottawa and traditionally known as Odawa, a word meaning traders. As a person displanted from my homelands, I hold my personal and active journey of decolonization and growth through learning and action as an offering to Indigenous peoples of these lands. I commit to seeking ways to honor how our ancestors would have met and how they would have met pre-colonization and the traditional name of this city, in building new ways to trade, to exchange knowledge, skills, resources in our collective fight for freedom and a return to culture and tradition. This is a moment where we like to also offer another period of engagement. So we are sharing in the chat a link to, so everyone, a lot of it, we've been doing land acknowledgement for years, but a lot of the time people don't have the opportunity or don't get the time or take the time to find out the lands that they live and work on. So in the chat, if you follow the link, you can access a map that allows you to know what land you're sitting on, and a little bit of the background of the relationship between that land and the indigenous communities of that land and traditional caretakers of that land, as well as their history, a little bit of a guide on and a little bit of a guide on land acknowledgement and acknowledging the land that you're on. So who we are and what we do. The Anti-Racist Cooperation Hub is a coordination secretariat and a resource center for the Canadian international cooperation sector. The goal is really to allow the sector to better understand and integrate anti-racist principles, practices, theories. And so we do that by offering training spaces, knowledge sharing spaces, creating networks of support, providing and creating resources. It really is all about anti-racism and intersectional feminism at the Hub, and the ways in which we can learn and grow together and make it more of the guiding force of our work. Our core team at the ARC Hub is the three of us, so a small team for a big job and a big sector. It's myself as as we introduce ourselves, myself as the racial justice expert, Barbara as the program coordinator, and Megan as the program assistant. And we work alongside the sector. So there is a fourth member of our team. Little did you know, you are a part of our team as the sector. And we find those opportunities to connect through our task force, our working groups, and our affinity groups. So right now, our task force is a really, really big and important part of the work that we're doing right now, as we're in our 2023 signatory period and surveying period of the sector. So make sure that you check that out. And one thing that we like to make sure to clarify is the Anti-Racist Hub is really about anti-racism. In years where anti-racism has become more and more of a topic, often it gets lost that anti-racism has to be an active practice. A lot of the time we think about the knowledge side of it, of understanding what racism is, of understanding what it looks like, but it really is about understanding what it looks like and then being able to make sure that we're taking the active steps to challenge the systems, the biases, the policies that have been created over time to create racist societies that we unfortunately have the big task of having to combat and live through today. So the work that we do at the Anti-Racist Cooperation Hub is really evaluating history, the history of the Canadian international development sector in relation to the side here in Canada and its relationship with the global community, and finding the ways that it fits to understand this as a really big topic that means so many different things in all the contexts that we work in. Another moment of engagement, if you haven't already done so, please change your name and your title on your Zoom block, I guess. And please add your language of preference, your name, and if you feel comfortable, your pronouns. If you feel comfortable, please introduce yourself in the chat. And if you have any accessibility needs that you'd like to share with us, please do so. You can either private message any of the three of us, or you can just share them in the chat if you feel comfortable. Yes, that's a quick overview of us at the ARC Hub. So before we get started, one thing that's really important to us at the ARC Hub is really grounding ourselves and the folks that engage in our sessions in the understanding that we're coming together, creating a small community. And because we are folks coming from a little bit of all over, and a lot of us haven't met together, worked together, engaged in this way together before, we like to really ground ourselves and bring us together under some foundational principles. So we go through our community agreement and then we'll go through our rules of engagement. The community agreement is really just an opportunity to set collective guidelines on how we're choosing to engage together. So we like to say, if there are any that you'd like to edit, add, remove, please engage with us either in the chat or in the chat. But the ones that we like to start off with are, number one, we are trusting you to do what you need to ensure your full participation and that you will communicate your needs as they change. Number two, we are committing to building a safer space, prioritizing confidentiality, equitable participation, honesty, and ownership over our words and actions. Number three, we are coming here open-minded, intending to be respectful and accountable, and we will address harmful behavior. So I'll give it a moment to see if there's anyone that has any comments or questions in the chat. And Barbara, I'll let me know if there's anything that comes up. All good? Perfect. We'll switch over to our rules of engagement. So when we come together and when we engage in any part at any time, as communities, as individuals, we're always engaging with a lot of assumptions. Just right now, I'm sure that you've made a million assumptions about me, and that's a natural thing. But when we're having these types of conversations, we want to make sure that we're on the same page as much as possible. So our rules of engagement, or what we used to call our community assumptions, are a few statements that we are operating from and asking all those who are engaging with us in this space to move through understanding. So again, these are all up for discussion. And if you have some that you'd like to add, we're always open to it. This is about creating something collectively, and that feels right for how we are choosing to engage and how we're coming together in the space. So number one is all systems of oppression exist and are interconnected. Number two is we are all here because we want and choose to be here. Number three, opposing systems of oppression, building alternatives, and cultural change are all necessary. Number four, we live at intersections. We all benefit and are harmed by systematic oppression, even if in different ways. Number five, dismantling systems of oppression benefits everyone. Number six, an individual and or a community is the expert of their own experience, and the solutions to the problems they face. Number 7, confronting social injustice can be painful and or joyful. Number 8, everyone deserves the autonomy of choice. Number 9, liberation is possible. And number 10, the body doesn't lie. So we'll give another moment to see how that fits with everyone. If there's anything that you'd like to add, change.
There's one comment. So from Stephanie, dismantling systems of oppression benefits everyone on the long term.
Mhm. Is it an edit to add on the long term?
I think so. It's a maybe an offering of a yes, it is an edit.
Yes, that's an important point. I think a lot of we've had this be a point of conversation before, where a lot of people won't feel like it is something that benefits them in the moment. The work of anti-racism, just generally equity work, is about challenging systems that do make some people very comfortable and have allowed some people or communities to greatly benefit from the discomfort or harm of others. And so when that dynamic shifts, it is not going to feel for some very beneficial. But the idea is that dismantling systems of oppression, like was mentioned, is something that in the long run does benefit everyone, creating equitable societies, building sustainable practices, building really community-centered practices that are founded in care and founded in compassion and founded in understanding and not wanting to repeat history, and especially harmful histories, are very, very beneficial in the long term to everyone. Because what we have learned over and over again in our current scenario is that although some people benefit, that generally, even for those who benefit, the current practices aren't sustainable. And so at some point, everybody is harmed by the current systems.
Maybe. I think the only thing I was going to add is maybe you want to talk a little bit about the body doesn't lie, because often it's the one folks don't always grasp fully, but I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for that. The body doesn't lie is one, yes, it is one that often brings up a lot of questions. It's really centered in wanting to take a moment to acknowledge that a lot of the time we really prioritize the words and ways in which we're able to communicate. And sometimes we don't. So a lot of the work that we do is grounded in community. It's grounded in finding understanding of traditions and really how we relate together. The body doesn't lie is really grounded in understanding that things sit and things sometimes feel very differently in our bodies than how our brain allows us to process it through a lot of different ways or conditions. So the body doesn't lie is a moment to validate that sometimes something is going to sit in your body in a way that is hard or uncomfortable, and you don't have the words for it. And in that moment, it is really just saying, whether or not you have the words for it, if something doesn't feel right for you, we're validating that. And so if something doesn't feel right, if something feels really joyful, however it's sitting in your body, even if you don't have the words for it, we're really wanting to validate that, because even especially in anti-racism work, and especially because of living in societies that are conditioned a certain type of way, and there are a lot of very strict and specific rules of engagement. This is a way of really acknowledging and validating that sometimes there is also not space to communicate what's happening for you, or you haven't been given the space to communicate what's happening for you. But again, wanting to in this space really validate and also communicate to others the importance of validating that sometimes our bodies are telling us a lot more than our brains allow us to, or our words are, and our words have allowed us to. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, concerns? All good. So what does it mean to think past the terminology? So I'll start by saying a lot of the time when we come into anti-racist trainings, we are going over what does it mean to be racist? What does it mean not to be racist? How do all of the different ways in which we engage and have been taught to engage with systems, institutions, individuals, power, um, create racist outcomes? And something about creating this session as the first session in our training plan was about kind of taking us away from focusing so much on terminology and really thinking about what does it mean to know what these words mean, but also know what they mean to us and take a moment to really stop and really reflect on what they mean to us. Now, it's not at all to say that the terminology isn't important. People have taken a long, long history in understanding and being able to name really important experiences, realities, and realities. And so we're thinking past the terminology to further validate the importance of the terminology. So we really want to take a moment to say the terminology is still important. It's just what do we do with it? And really, I think in thinking about creating this session, one thing that was I was talking to a friend that also does this work, and we were just talking about how a lot of anti-racist work, especially in the West, is grounded in explaining terminology because the expectation is if you know what these words mean, obviously you're going to want to do something. You're going to want to do something to change those realities, to change the reason why those words were created. But what we notice over years of seeing and doing and experiencing anti-oppression work and trainings is that that's not always where it goes. It's kind of, we know what it means now, but what do we do next? And so this session is really about grounding us in and having a moment of reflection on what does it mean to think past the terminology? What does this terminology mean to me in my personal life, and how am I able to translate it in the way that I'm engaging with others, and thinking about what this means in the work that I'm doing on a day-to-day. Now, we're saying thinking past the terminology, but there are still some three terms that we're going to be holding on to very deeply throughout this session. One is humility. It is incredibly important when we're engaging in these conversations to be coming from and holding on to humility and being humble, being willing to, being willing to challenge ourselves and sit in personal discomfort and guilt. The knowing that we will never understand the experiences of someone living at different intersections than we are, but still that it's important for us to be able to validate those experiences with action to ensure that those experiences aren't something that we're just witnessing and validating, but that on our day-to-day, we're taking the active steps to challenge and to restructure the systems, institutions, policies, structures that are creating those outcomes. And challenging the defense mechanisms. In the same way that we say sitting in personal discomfort and guilt, a lot of the times when we sit in discomfort and guilt, one thing that comes up is that defense mechanism. And especially in societies where we've been raised, whether consciously or not, to value some and not others, it's important to realize that a lot of the time those defense mechanisms are coming from a place where you're being challenged by someone that you were never taught to believe that you could be challenged by, or in a system or in a structure that benefits you and that you don't feel comfortable existing outside of. So it is really important to be humble enough to challenge those personal discomforts and the ways in which guilt comes up, especially in a sector like the Canadian international cooperation sector, or just generally international cooperation, where we do understand that right now in this work, it is a lot of what history has done and now what we have to do to rectify and support the outcomes that came out of really harmful histories. Another point and theme and term that's really important is honesty. So taking intentional time for reflection while prioritizing the truth over perception. And so one thing, and one of the reasons why this session is really interactive and will be very conversational, is that a lot of the time we are really worried about not wanting to be referred to as racist, or in the case of the work that we do at the Art Club, misogynist, or anywhere between those terms and around them. And one thing that's important for us is that it is important to realize, and I was saying this earlier, that I wasn't sure how to mention this because it can be a little bit controversial, but I was watching this video that essentially said, what if we all agreed that we are all racist? We grew up in a racist society, and our work from there is to challenge the ways in which we've been taught certain things that maybe we're not conscious of. It's not to say that we're intentionally racist or that we love the ideas or the perspectives of what that informs, but that because we were raised in a society that has certain beliefs and works in a certain way, that we hold these ideas, and our job is to challenge them. And what does it look like to be honest about that? And to be honest about that in a way where, okay, this is where I'm starting. This is what my capacity is in this work. This is what it looks like for me to communicate my capacity, and for you to be able to have all of the information necessary to be able to engage your autonomy and create safety around yourself while engaging with me. So the truth over perception is really just a moment of being honest, being really vulnerable, really sitting with yourself, understanding the processes and the systems in which we are brought up, and the ways in which those instill some really strong and often unconscious beliefs and perspectives, and that sometimes being honest means recognizing that, being vulnerable enough to communicate that, and to holding that as important over being perceived in a specific way. So so the questions tend to be, what are your beliefs? What are you willing to sacrifice? And what are you not? What is important to you? And allowing, again, others to engage their autonomy and how they create safety for themselves whilst engaging with you in your process of learning and unlearning. So it's honesty, the one that's on the title is honesty, but I think it's important to say equally from honesty is vulnerability in engaging and finding yourselves at the beginning of these processes. And then the last one that always comes up is bias. If you can show me a person out there that doesn't have any biases, I'd like to meet them, because it would be incredible to see how can we be of those, exist in that way. But bias is important to realize that we all have it. It's something that we learn and that we build as a way often to protect ourselves and to create our reality and to understand how we move through the world, and how we move through the world in a way that allows us to be feel safe and in control. And so bias often built over time whilst engaging with institution systems and societal norms. It is your worldview, whether you're cognizant of it or not. And I like to explain it as the clouded lens through which you see the world. So I don't know, for those of you who wear glasses, sometimes you're wearing glasses, your glasses are real dirty, but you don't realize until someone's like, hey, you want to take a moment to clean your glasses? And in that moment, you could either be like, what do you mean my glasses are dirty? Or you could be like, thank you. And now you clean your glasses and they're clean. So bias is the same way, that a lot of time is something that you don't notice. You've had them for a long time. You've always seen through dirty glasses. This is how you've always known the world, to the point that you don't even know that they're dirty. But one day someone comes along and it's like, hey, your glasses are dirty. And you're like, no, that's how my glasses are. And you're like, no, the glasses are a little cloudy. And it's up to you then to be like, okay, I'm going to clean my glasses, or I'm going to choose to keep living life how I have and how has made me comfortable for so long. I go too far. Yep. So before, I think this is a slide before there are two more slides before we get to the exercise. Okay, so this one, the one before the one, is just a moment of some of the observations or preparing us, just setting some ground on some of the observations on the current state of anti-racism and intersectional feminism. So this is just the bubble is for something that you can engage in the chat. But the first is people are eager to understand but don't know what this means in practice. So a lot of the time in the almost decade that I've been doing these types of trainings, a lot of what I hear is, what does it mean? What does this mean? I know what anti-racism is. I know what I know what racism is. I know what misogyny is. I know what all of these things mean, but how do I make it into a practice? And a lot of the time that's where people get stuck, because in the second point, there's often that eagerness, but that eagerness is often confronted by the unmovingness of systems, of institutions, of procedures, of often personal bias and privilege. So one of the reasons why we really wanted to have a session around like really reflecting on what this means to us is that when we're doing this work of understanding racism, understanding misogyny, ableism, xenophobia, all of these things have been upheld by the systems, the personal privileges, the procedures that have been created over time, the cultural norms that we've been living through and contributing to. And without that personal reflection, a lot of the time we default to those systems without the understanding of what it looks like for us to buy into those systems, how they engage with us, how we feed into them. That eagerness to understand and to integrate anti-racist practices, procedures, theories, all of those things tend to meet those moments that have been created to create conflict for those moments of change. So I just often like to name that to be interested in creating anti-racist change is to understand that the systems that you're working within, the policies that you're working with, the privilege that you're working from are always going to, at some point, create conflict with that change. What you do then is what defines what your anti-racism journey looks like. And what you do then with that moment of realization is what allows others to engage their autonomy in creating safety around engaging with you. And so it's just always something that's important to note is that really and truly, there's no way to engage with these systems without truly understanding and engaging in anti-racism. So again, like what said at the beginning, is it's really a process of understanding and restructuring the systems, institutions, and procedures that we've all normalized, and really understanding our personal bias and privilege and the way that it feeds into those systems, institutions, and procedures, and that often creates discomfort around really following through in anti-racism and intersectional feminist journeys. The third point, the focus on terminology has often taken away from an understanding of the everyday practice. So again, really focusing on terminology and being able to communicate that you have an understanding of the terminology often has found itself more important than it's the practice of. So being able to communicate, this is an anti-racist workplace, or our program is programming, or communications, or our granting is anti-racist, or it's decolonial, or it's feminist. But then the practice of it doesn't speak that through. So what does it look like to be able to really understand the terminology in practice? What does it mean to really take the focus away from being able to communicate that you've been to a training or that you've engaged in this conversation, and move from that to being able to say, this is what I'm doing on a day-to-day, and what I'm doing has been validated, has been checked in on, has been accountable to racialized people living at the intersections of different marginalized gender identities. The fourth point is the fear of whitelash. So we have to be honest that we live in white supremacist systems, institutions, and societies, and that is something that is by design. It's how history has brought us to where we are, and often when we are talking about anti-racism or intersectional feminism, the thing that challenges it the most, and this is kind of a repetition of everything else, is that we are in that reality. And that when we start talking about really integrating and understanding anti-racism or intersectional feminism, that we counter that in a way that makes those in power often destabilizes the natural order of things and those who have for so long held power. And so where we often find conflict with this work is in the fear of whitelash, in the fear of what it means to counter those systems, in the fear of what it means to be someone without power at the hands of these systems and at the hands of the ability to move this work forward being in the hands of those who don't benefit from this work moving forward. And as a sector, we are having trouble understanding these conversations under a global context. So this is one of the moments that I think is really important for us to always communicate at the ARC Hub. The ARC Hub works with the Canadian international cooperation sector. We have a very deep understanding that anti-racism in a lot of the rest of the world is not a point of focus, and actually contextually doesn't make a lot of sense as a point of focus because of the realities that racialized people are living within those contexts. However, we do operate from the belief that Western concepts of anti-racism and racism, feminism, white feminism, intersectional feminism have incredibly large effects on the rest of the world and how we engage, especially as a sector, with other communities. And so often where the conversation ends is, well, this doesn't mean anything in Cameroon, like why would we be talking about that in that situation? But then again, what does it mean to be a sector that works from the West, working with racialized communities without an understanding of the complexities of that relationship, both historically and just in the ways that we understand human engagement, especially in community-based ways, and especially understanding communities from racialized backgrounds? Feel like I'm already way past time. So really quickly, what we are looking at today. Today, we aren't going to go, I know I've talked a lot about societal norms, a lot about system institutions. We are staying away from talking about anti-racism in the big side of it. We are really wanting to see and focus on, what does this mean to you? What does it mean to your community? What does it mean to you in relationship to your community? And that community can be you and the community you come from racially. It can be you and your community in your workplace. But I'm really wanting to center this in, okay, we understand this in the big scheme of things. Racism is a huge word. Anti-racism is a huge word, but we are really wanting to take this, what does it mean when I'm sitting one-on-one in the chair in front of me, I'm dealing with what this means for me, then what does that look like? We're talking about morals and ethics, and we're talking about personal beliefs and how they guide people's engagement with us and our engagement with them and our engagement with this work. So really, really wanting to keep this small scale, because again, we have to understand that these systems are fed by individual decisions. So a lot of the time we say, well, this thing is so big, like, well, it's not me, it's this thing. But on an everyday basis, every decision that you make, every action that you take feeds into that system. And so when you separate yourself from that, you take accountability. You break off that moment of accountability of how you're contributing to the ways in which this is allowed to continue to happen. And in the other side of it, without understanding the personal relationship that you have with these systems, is the same way that you don't empower yourself to be able to make everyday decisions that allows us to restructure and change the current reality that a lot of us are living through. So this moment is about really looking at the small scale. And the reason why a lot of the questions will be very about about personal reflection. Is I know a lot of the time when I'm doing these types of sessions, a lot of people are coming for, this is step 1, step 2, step 3 on how to be anti-racist. Well, we were joking about this yesterday. We were like, ChatGPT these days could create an anti-racism strategy. But then what does it mean for you to receive that strategy if you don't know what anti-racism means to you? You don't know your capacity for anti-racist change. You don't know how much you're willing to sacrifice, how little you're willing to sacrifice. You can't communicate that to others. It means that a lot of the time, that strategy doesn't really mean much and isn't really going to benefit the people who are supposed to benefit from it, because at the end of the day, it's just a strategy. Without our personal understanding of our relationship to anti-racism work, there's quite little that we can do to create anti-racist change. Because if it continues to come from the external, because we have to understand anti-racism, the same way that anti-racism and racism are both very personal things. They've been elevated onto this huge stage because they have huge effects, but it is about really your relationship and how you understand others and how you understand yourself in relationship to others. So what does it look like? What does it mean to be able to reflect on this really personally, really ground yourself on what this means to you, enough that you're able to communicate it. So when you are in a process of creating an anti-racism strategy or a plan or a policy, you're able to make it something that you really have the capacity to engage with in a way that benefits those who need it the most. So the next slide has a lot of questions, but don't be scared. You don't have to answer them all. So we're going to be going into breakout rooms pretty in this session right now, but I'll just take a moment to explain what we'll be doing. So again, these questions are very personal questions. They're meant for you to reflect from a place of honesty and vulnerability. This is not a space where you have to perform. There are no right answers. If you are I've always said, and I know for anyone who's worked with me, it always gets a little tiring to hear this, but I've always said, if you are in a space where you, for example, are in this session and you're like, I'm listening to this Black person talk, but this is just a Black person talking about anti-racism. Of course they have these opinions. Black people always have these opinions. It's really important for you to be able to communicate that. It's really important for you to be able to say that out loud and for people to be able to understand that. It's not about being able to be like, this was great and I love every part of it, because that's not honest. That's not somewhere to build from. And so for those who are speaking and those who are hearing, of course, there are some boundaries because we don't want to be creating harm, but it is important to be really responding to these questions in a way where we're being as honest and vulnerable as possible, in a way that allows for the conversation to be grounded, again, in honesty and vulnerability, and be as constructive as possible. So just going through them really quickly. Number one, who are the communities you work with? How do their histories relate to their needs? So this can be through your work. This can be from you as a person that works, for example, in your community. How are you using your power and privilege to subvert harmful norms today, tomorrow, etc.? What brought you to this work? What keeps you in this work? So what brought you to the Canadian international cooperation sector? Or what brought you to anti-racism work, or wanting to understand anti-racism? Number four, what has anti-racist change or embedding intersectional feminism look like for you? How about your organization? And how does your racialized staff feel about it? So in thinking about how you've done this work, really specifically, have you and do you know how your racialized staff has felt about this process and how it's landed for them? Number five, when was the last time you were challenged? What did you do? How did you feel? Number six, who do you feel accountable to and why? So in your work, in your personal life, who gets that accountability? Number seven, how does bias show up in your day-to-day? What could the effects of that bias be? Number eight, what are your goals on these subjects? What has progress looked like for you? Number nine, what is most important to you in the work that you do and why? So in your position, in your role, in your organization, or in the work that you do just generally, what is most important to you, and why? And number 10, what are your limitations on these themes? What are the effects of these limitations on others? So just again, another moment of reflection and communication. So we'll be opening up the breakout rooms. And if you need any of us, please we'll be in the main room. And so we can come into the breakout rooms whenever, but you will be free to discuss. We'll be here. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope that you had some fruitful discussions in your breakout room. This is the moment where, so we're going to do some reflections. We aren't going to do report backs. This is really a moment where we like challenge folks to for your participation in today's workshop. Please remember, this is only the beginning. This is only a small moment in a really long journey. And it's important to give yourself grace and pat yourself on the back for showing up today, but making sure that that pat on that back is coupled with action, honesty. We hope to engage with you further in the future, and don't forget, action over perception and honesty over terminology. And we like to do some reminders. The ARC Hub is in its 3rd signatory period, so we are right now surveying the sector on where we are as a sector in anti-racism. When you fill out our survey, you become signatory of the ARC framework. The framework and our past reports are all on our website. And when you receive this slideshow, you'll also receive the links to the survey, but they also live on our website. And if you go to our social medias, we've been sharing them. So lots of places to access the signatory period. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. You'll be receiving a post-event survey. It won't be the one that I put in the link, but it will be one that you'll receive from CanWatch. And please, for all of you who are grant funded, who are government funded, you know how important it is for us to be able to give data back to our funders. So please do fill out that post-event survey so we can prove to the government that people are showing up to our things. And sign up to our newsletter if you want to stay in touch with our work and to stay up to date with what we're up to for things like our signatory period, our trainings, our affinity groups that will be, our affinity and working groups that will be coming up, our task force that is forever growing and working. So many opportunities over the next few years, because our program right now is 3 years, so get us while we're here. And lastly, our website is where you can get all of the information and stay up to date with our work. And that is also something that you'll have access to through this slide, but also in the chat. So thank you. Merci d'être venu et d'avoir participé dans notre présentation. It was a pleasure. These are big topics, but like we said at the beginning, it can be joyful as much as it can be painful. And it was a joy to be able to engage with you today. Hopefully you got a little bit of something that you wanted. And if not, please let us know. And we are always hoping to build bigger and better with you and for you. Again, our ARC Hub is funded by the Government of Canada and is hosted by Cooperation Canada. And so we want to say a big thank you to those folks. And again, a big thank you to CanWatch for having us and being a partner in our first session of our 2023 training plan. Always, always a pleasure. And yeah, have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you sometime soon on a screen or hopefully in person. Bye.